Hello out there. My name's Dan Davis, and this is Whittlin Time with Woodland Woodcarvers. We are a club that meets once a month, put on some demonstrations. All of our demonstrations are shared via YouTube, and if you'd like to look up, I think we probably have somewhere like 100 titles, different subjects, different types of carving. But again, Whittlin Time on YouTube. You can also see us at Woodland Carvers on Facebook. I found this book. It's called Game Bird Carving by Bruce Burke. With this book, I made this bird. This was the first bird that I ever carved. And there's things I look at it now, there are things that are wrong with it. But again, for a first carving, I was very proud of that. The book itself, the patterns in it, they happen to come in this size. And in that, it says you can blow it up to life size, which I did. This is the original pattern, and it's the same pattern here. There are some guide marks along the bottom, and on that, I went ahead and drew the lines in on each one of the guide marks, both horizontally and vertically. So I've got squares. Then it says, enlarge them to the size you want, in this case, 1-inch squares. So you take this, and I'm looking at it, I went through here on the very top line, I went A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And over here, I started with the line that was just below the bottom of the bird and numbered them 1, 2, 3 on up. You do the same thing on your 1-inch squares over here. You draw the squares in, and then you start looking at these and say, okay, if I were to start at the beak here, I am between line 6 and 7, and that's where it starts, and this is the A line. So I'm at the A line between 6 and 7. And then I go from that mark right there, I run it on. Well, where's it cross here? The next intersection is B7, and the beak goes from there to B7. Now it's going around here. Again, I have it marked, where it crosses each one of these lines. And again, this is a sketch, not necessarily the finished pattern. And again, I'm continuing it on out, but you can see here, I'm starting to get the shape of that duck's head. Okay. Before you start carving, gather the equipment you're going to need. Come prepared. Okay? So, this, by the way, you can head things off. I'm going to be cutting toward my thumb. So, if I'm carving, doing this, any kind of shaving toward me, that's not going to guarantee anything, but it'll help. And maybe even I'd put a second one on a little bit lower here. The other option, a glove like this, it'll stop a lot of the problems that you might have had otherwise. The best knife is the sharp one. It makes sense. If you've got a dull knife, you got to pull or push harder. Then it slips. Okay? If you've got a sharp blade, you can slice through, and it does make it easier to control. The nice thing about this particular book, they actually have photographs, real patterns. So what does that real one look like? It's there to help. How do you get the pattern onto the block of wood? Well, in this case, you're starting out with a small block like this. I like to have them a little bit wider, the block a little bit wider than what your pattern is, so that when you go to cut it out, that keeps those side pieces in one piece. So you're going to take this, two different ways to do it. You can take the pattern and lay out some newspaper, any spray adhesive, spray on there, take it on there, and take it to your block. Make sure you line up the bottom of the pattern. These patterns show a keel on them, which we're not using, so we have to make sure that it's the bottom of the actual bird that's at the bottom of the block. So that's glued down on there. We do the same thing with a top view, and I like to keep the beak, the tip of the beak, right even with the end of the block. That makes it easier to line up the top view. You can, if you're keeping it back a little bit, again, you could take that and draw that line up, even if it was back, say, that far, and draw it across that way too. So we've got the two views on there. Then take it to your bandsaw, go ahead and start cutting it out. In this one, I would probably make the two beak cut first. A rule for using a bandsaw: make the short cuts first. That way there's a minimum amount of backing out, okay? So I would make that one. Then I'm doing the tail here. I'm coming across, and I could go straight in to meet this edge, but on this one I went across on the angle, made the turn, and followed it around to the beak. Same on this side. So we've got both sides. We've got this side cut first, then we're doing the side view here, and again, you can either glue it on, or if you're going to do more than one, or if you're trying to help somebody else, you can take and glue the pattern onto some stiff material. This happens to be about a 1/4 inch thick, a plastic type material, but you could do it on a number of anything that are firm enough so that they don't fold. So anyway, I traced this on here with that one and the top also. Again, it's right there. So we've got that traced on there. Take that. Now it's unwrapping the gift here. It's Christmas time, okay? Do I have a duck hiding in the middle of there someplace? And so that's what we start with. On that, and I'm going to remove my glove for a while here, you can either freehand, depending on how good you are, a center line down it, or measure the blank, and this one I find the center line right there, and I know it's going to come to the center of the tail. So that just helps me later on. I can connect the one from the top down, and we have the center line down the entire bird, and run that all the way out. Now, sometimes things change as you're working a little bit, but that just gives you a guide to get you started. The other thing that I like to do is make a template. How much do I take off from here? Ducks don't have any squared corners on them. So I take that same pattern, and I take that and I glued it, in this case, on a piece of clear plastic, happened to be from a piece that a tool came in, and so I glued that on there. And so this is where I want to go. Well, it's exactly half, and it doesn't go to the center line. And I should put that center line down the breast also. But it doesn't go to the center line. So wherever it's touching, that's probably where I have to cut some of the material away. I have the same idea here. Again, a piece of that pattern, and I take that, cut that away, and this is one, hey, it doesn't go. So, you know, this is the bottom down here. We're not going to mess with that, but that top, it's starting right there. So that's, I know that's where I got it cut. Now, that's supposed to fit right there, okay? Does it fit there yet? Of course not. Now, if I'm taking this one, anyway, it has to be on the right side of the bird. Now, it will fit on the left side when you're done. We hope that's the goal, but you know, it's about a midships on the bird. I've got several other, you know, several birds here, some of which, these were all my pieces that I would have just in case, you know, that student would come back and say, well, how do you do this side? How do you try to get me to do the other side? One time I had a student come and say, well, I'm done, I can't do anymore. He says, why? He says, I broke it. I dropped it and the head broke off. I said, well, that's good. You're just a step ahead of me is all. You know, we'll get there. And he said, well, you know, what do you mean I'm a step ahead of you? Here's one that's been painted up. And turn that head to the left or to the right. You can turn it down, duck resting on his chin or whatever. I always told the students that if these were full-size deeks and there was a flock coming over and you're trying to call them in to hunting range, if everybody down there on the water is standing there at attention, every decoy, the ducks they're not going to come to them. That's the whole idea, to call them in. So you make them in different positions, you know, just like when we're in a group, somebody's looking this way, somebody's looking that way. I even at one time showed somebody, I said, make a half a decoy, because that's the way they feed for a mallard. So anyway, changing it is, you know, part of the game. This book, again, the Burke book, has painting instructions also. Now, again, you can go out and buy a lot of other books that have the patterns, have them full size, have things that, you know, they show you step by step. Like so many things, all it takes is time and money. And that's one of the advantages. And I tell people, get as many photographs of your subject as you can, be it live bird. You know, now you can go online and download just about anything, but you know, get the live bird, go to your park. In this case, we're Greater Grand Rapids area, you know, John Ball Park. You know, there's, you know, a couple hundred mallards there almost every day during the summer. But take some pictures so you've got some ideas. Again, this is another one of the books that were, you know, available, and they have the patterns already full size. But if you look around this room, we're not all the exact same size. Some of us are built low and sleek, and some of us are just low. So anyway, ducks will vary a bit also. They're, you know, at the beginning you look at them, they all look the same, or did to me anyway. But if you take a closer look, there's a little bit of leeway in there. When you get to doing these, another step up in your skill level, get some dressmaker's pins. I'll take this pin. If it was right there, poke it in, and I got to do the same on the other side. It's very important that you get them the same distance back and forward and the same distance up and down. You don't want to have one eye down here and the other eye way up there. But once I got that little poke in there a ways, pull it out, and I make a little bit of a indent with a fine drill probably. Could use a sharp knife blade, but the fine drill bit, and then cut it off maybe 3/16 of an inch or thereabouts, so you can poke that in and it sets back in, so only the outer half of the ball of that pin is showing. And that, again, is another step up in your carving levels. The same book, again, this one happens to be a canvas back, and I made several of the copies of the pattern, copied it once out of the book and then redid. So I have a master that way. And again, then we're back to either tracing it off the pattern or tracing it this way. For telling, again, the students, if you look at a mallard and several of the other ducks, it comes down in the front and then the bill goes out. If you happen to look at a canvas back, the shape of the bill, it's almost coming off the top of the head. It's got a longer slope, a little bit of a indent right there, but a longer slope. And it would be wrong if I were to cut out a shape like this and then paint it in canvas back colors, or vice versa. So you want to make sure, for me, that was one of the more important things. Get the head shape right, or as close as you can to being right. One of the finished canvas backs, I would do different ones with different classes, and then following the instructions in the book, painted that so that most people would recognize it as a mallard, and then antique it. Now these were painted with acrylic paints, and then a darker oil-based paint or a stain to rub over it. First time you get somebody to do it, they kind of, their heart skips a beat, because you got a nice paint job on it that might look something like this just painted canvas back, and the mallards were nice and bright and nice looking, and then you make them all dirty, that antiquing on it. I like that a little bit better. Again, if you feel adventurous, you can put a sleeper in there. Make it a little bit different so that they're not all the same. Here again, you can see the difference in the paint. The antiquing on it, and then the non-antiquing on it. And again, each one, if you look at this one, this wing line is just a groove in there. On this one, it's carved in. It's a little better body shape. But again, if you try to get too much detail with a beginning carver, they can lose interest. They just, more than they want to handle. But if you introduce them to this, then you can go ahead. And again, the carving part of this, the next step anyway is putting the head width on. The pattern from the book, this is actually designed to be a wall plaque, a half decoy. So you got half the pattern, which works great for making our templates and so on, but you have to look at how wide is it from the center line to the cheek. And in this case, because I've done this before, anyway, I draw a couple of guides on there. And again, you can measure these. Now, we're not going to do the entire head until later, but right here we have what I refer to as the shoulder area. And again, remember, if you cut the head off, that's okay. You know. So we're going to take this, making sure I don't have my fingers in line with the blade. I make a stop cut right there, and then I can start carving down to it. Until I get all the way down to my guidelines. And in this particular setup, because the grain of the wood was here, this comes off pretty easy. And this is basswood. Now, for those of you who have power equipment, you know, you start out the same as far as the patterns and so on. So I've got half of the head cut out. Now I would go ahead and do the other hand side. You don't need to watch me do that. You've seen that before or done it yourself. So you know, that's how I start with the head. Then I can switch. I start doing the butt. And again, that center line business helps here also, which I should have put on to start out with. But on this particular bird, my first bird, that side is almost straight up and down. Mallards aren't flat on the side. They're rounded. Birds are, you know, they're just not. Same way here, almost straight up and down. So, you know, at that point, I was afraid of cutting off too much. And, you know, should have taken, you know, much more. On this one, if we're gonna carve here, that's my center point, my center line. And I can see that it's going to round under about that much. So I can draw that same line there, and any one of the knives. And it's probably about halfway up where that's rounding to, not quite halfway, but close. So again, I'm carving here toward my thumb where I have the Band-Aid pre-positioned. And I would normally work back and forth between the two sides. Same way on the top, starting to round it over. Again, keeping your pictures, your patterns at hand. And again, since we're going with the grain here, if I come in here, it's going to dig in and split a big chunk out. So I'm going from the fattest point of the bird right here forward, and from that same fat point backwards, trying not to take the tail yet. Okay, so again, that's the basic procedure. We do need to make a little valley in the middle here, and again, because this pattern was developed for making a plaque on a wall, they're not showing it, so you need the other pictures. And right along that center line, it's going to dish down a little bit, just like your back, between your shoulder blades, on the back. And then we can take this, start rounding the butt up to the tail. Again, try to leave this top tail pattern the way it is for now. Same way right here, we got a flat from the cutout meeting here. We got to start rounding that. Again, cutting from the back forward. Okay, so again, we're getting the bird roughed out. When we get to the head and the cheek of the bird is going to stick out, then it comes in at the eyelid, and there's kind of a egg shape right here on the bird. And on that one, I'm not going all the way to the center line, but about halfway. And of course, below the chin, we've got a lot more to take off. So I think that's about all we have time for right now. I do have a couple of other birds if you want to get a little bit more detail on them. Again, we got a little wood burning, and that again I would not recommend for a middle school student starter project, but if you decide you want to give it a try, that's something you can do. And those of you who have experience in bird carving and some knowledge, you can do your own thing. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.